Welcome to the 48th episode of the Interview Series. The Interview Series is a production of 1 Week Critique, an Iowa-based arts and education nonprofit that offers educational resources and editorial support to students and teachers of the literary arts. You can learn more about us and our programs or support our work by visiting our website, oneweekcritique.com. That's the number 1weekcritique.com. And please like and subscribe to help us continue producing valuable content. I'm Matthew Schmidt, joined today by Christopher Locke. Christopher Locke was born in New Hampshire and received his MFA from Goddard College. His poems, fiction, criticism, and essays have appeared in, among others, the North American Review, Poets and Writers, The Rumpus, Another Chicago Magazine, Poetry East, Smoke Lawn Quarterly, Verse Daily, Southwest Review, Slice, Spillway, Art, The Literary Review, The Sun, Rain Taxi, West Branch, Rattle, Agenda, 32 Poems, Rhino, Saranac Review, The Stinging Fly, The Southeast Review, Barrel House, JMWW, The Adirondack Review, and NPR's Morning Edition and Ireland's Radio 1. He won the 2018 Black River Chatbook Award with Black Lawrence Press in 2020 for his collection of short stories, 25 Trumbull's Road. His new book of poems, Music for Ghosts on NYQ Books, and memoir, Without Saints on Black Lawrence Press, are both forthcoming in 2022. Locke received the Dorothy Sargent Rosenberg Poetry Award and grants in poetry from Fundación Valparaiso in Spain, the Massachusetts Cultural Council, and the New Hampshire State Council on the Arts. He has been nominated for Best of the Net and the Pushcart Prize many times. Chris lives in the Adirondacks, where he teaches English at SUNY Plattsburgh and North Country Community College. Welcome, Christopher.
Thank you, Matthew, for having me. And, hearing that out loud shows me clearly I need to work on revising that. That bio is way too long. I got to cut it. But thanks for letting me know. Yeah, it's great. It's great to be here. How are you?
I'm glad to have you. And it's great to be published in a lot of places, right?
Yeah, it's good. It's a good feeling for sure.
All right. Today we'll be looking at 4x100 Seasons, which is a flash story written over 6 months. I thought we could just start off by asking you to describe your writing process.
Sure. I have to say that in general, I very rarely have copies of previous drafts. I almost never do. And that's because my process of revision and writing is I do it simultaneously, which I know is somewhat unusual. I know there's other writers that do that, but I don't typically sit down, bang out 500 words, put it away, and then come back and start the revision process. I'm such a stickler, and I'm so OCD about it that as I write, I can get on a flow for a while and maybe, get in 60, 70 words, but I'll stop and go back and I'll revise what I already wrote. So it's always changing, even within the first draft. So the process for me is, one, I don't have a time that I set myself to. That's too terrifying for me and too rigid. And I think it's not organic enough in a lot of ways. It feels like I'm going to the office, which I think sometimes you have to do in general. Like you have to get work done, you got to get shit done. So you got to, hit some deadlines. I get that. But as a day-to-day thing, I don't adhere to that. So I generally like to write in the morning. Some mornings I don't write. Some mornings I get up, I have a cup of coffee, and I listen to some 7 Seconds or Circle Jerks and Dag Nasty, go outside, go for a bike ride, come home. But there's mornings when I have, it has to be some sort of a sensual, this might sound odd, but like having sort of a sensual feeling, a sensory feeling that comes from reading, reading other authors I admire. And then that can really sort of grease the gears and get it started. And then I'll sit down and sometimes I write in bed, which is really kind of nice. I don't know if other people like to do that or sit at my desk and do it. And then revise as I go. And then what I'll end up happening is always one copy. I just have this one copy that I'll go back to. The reason why I had several for the one we're talking about today is because I had thought there was a magazine called 100 Word Story. I think that's what it's called. And they want only stories of 100 words in length. So that was initially what I was trying to do. And I put that aside. And then I was dissatisfied with where it was. And I think we'll talk more about this, but that's when I decided to branch out. But I wanted to keep it just in case it became something I thought was serviceable that I might be able to send out. That's a lot of information, I realize, but I hope I kind of stayed to the topic you're asking. I hope I didn't go off too much on too many tangents.
Oh yeah, no, I think a lot of people write in different places. I think that, allows some sort of different thoughts and processes to go through the mind. I know some people like to write in the same place every time because they feel like some sense of, I don't know, wholeness or something in one
Yeah.
place. But I don't think it's weird to write in a lot of places. I also don't think it's weird to have some sort of feeling, whether it's sensuous or, reading some writers that you admire. And by the way, what are some writers that you admire?
Oh, okay. Like I love Tony Hoagland. I love Charlie Smith. Most of his first poetry. His fiction doesn't really do it for me. Um, let's see. Get caught like that. Ada Limon, of course. Bridget Jean Kelly, Adrienne Rich, Audre Lorde. I love her work. I'm reading now some Diane Seuss. I'm reading Frank, which is really great. I don't know if you've read that collection yet or not,
Not yet.
but it's wonderful. Kaveh Akbar, I think is really fantastic. Pilgrim Bell is his new collection, which is really, it's a departure for him a little bit because it became less about addiction writing, less about his addiction and more about family and language, which is it's a pretty brave collection. It's pretty powerful. I'm really enjoying it. So those are some off the top of my head. Dennis Johnson, always. Like he's always sort of in the center, I guess, that I'm thinking of my writing life. Always will be too.
So you had mentioned that fiction doesn't do it for you.
Well, Charlie Smith's fiction.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm just curious as to what is it about poetry that really engages you?
It's a felt thought, ultimately, right? That's what it is. It's sort of like transcends all the bullshit and cuts through it in a way that I'm fully experiencing the sensation that the writer is, and that I'm hoping when I'm in the act of it, that's what's happening for my reader. They're having that same exchange, that same transaction, and it's both of those things. And I've always felt that it's a felt thought, and then that is sort of becomes a commodity that it's almost three-dimensional in some ways when you're fully engaged with it. It sounds maybe it sounds a little bit odd, but it's just the only way that I can really describe it. That's why poetry works so well for me. It engages those senses that, like sort of like a phantom limb, right? But it still feels like it's happening. You still feel it, even though it's not literally happening. So that's why. And it's immediate. It's just immediate. It's just there's no wading through the grass to get to some discovery at times. I mean, of course, there's a lot of longer poems that require that, but in general.
Definitely. So let us look at the early draft of 4x100 Seasons, which is called Hubba Bubba.
Mm-hmm.
I will bring it up here on the screen for our viewers and ask you to read it whenever you're ready.
Sure. Hubba Bubba. You're stretched out oceanside, thinking of how she chose different plans. Beach towels brighten the dunes like a sky full of prayer rugs. Your skin rivals a lobster's blush. Toss in a cube of wintergreen gum and your mouth rains like a car wash. Sudden blast, sand buckshots your eyebrows, your cheeks, your hair, your teeth like the grill of a Peterbilt. The jogger keeps running, escapes with your pride. Women and children stare, horror-stricken. In your humiliation, you decide to stop chewing, then smile. The seawater continues lapping, calls for baptism. You stand, blow a bubble, and then everything falls apart.
Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So this early draft only has a hint of the details that are to come once we look at the final draft. And you've kind of already discussed your revision process. But I'm curious, since this moves through first a 100-word story and then a couple 300-word stories.
Yeah, that's right.
Were you trying to mimic that 100-word exercise that you were kind of doing moving along, or how did you think about putting in all these other details?
Yeah, that's right, Matthew. I was. I initially said, okay, this is an exercise, and very rarely do I do that. Very rarely do I say, okay, today I'm going to write a villanelle, and therefore I'm going to follow the blueprint, to do that. But again, I was really curious, with this magazine, and I thought there's a lot of great work, and so it looked like a challenge, right? It seemed like a really interesting challenge. So I made sure that as I wrote it, that the piece itself contained only 100 words. But it felt, when I finished it and put it aside and I started thinking about it, going about living my life, and I'm like cooking a fried egg, or like I'm talking on the phone, I'm like, there's more there. I wanted to know the antagonist or protagonist. I didn't know what he was yet. I wanted to know more about him, and I didn't know what that was. I didn't know why there was this disharmony that existed between him and this partner or potential partner. There's so many unanswered questions. So I realized I had to sort of write my way towards that solution. But at the same time, I wanted to keep honoring that challenge, that sort of constraint, by keeping it within the boundaries and parameters of 100 words. So that's where I got the next 200. And I'm like, okay, interesting. And then I realized there were seasons there, but I was like, well, God damn it, there's 4 seasons though. It doesn't feel right. So that's sort of how it started, and that's why I kept it to that sort of structure. And then trying to honor that, because I like a good challenge,
So maybe you could discuss the idea of the felt thought that you mentioned earlier in conjunction with fiction specifically. Right. So these are still very short. They could be poems. What do you think the difference is between, if there is any, the felt thought in poetry and something like Flash?
Very little. I think there's more of a difference in a traditional Western short story than in Flash, right? I think it's all about exposition, and then a short piece, 5,500 words, is a much different beast. It's a different animal that you're working to dig through and discover and have, hopefully equally rich, rewards and answers. But Flash for me, and that's really why within fiction, and I've been doing that now with essays as well, is I'm really focused on, is it's very similar to poems, and that there's I feel that there's an expectation for me anyways to withhold, the proverbial less is more, like that whole thing. But I think it applies, right? I really think it applies. And I think there's I think it's thrilling with what is left out or what is withheld versus what is provided. And I think the more that's withheld, the more mystery that is thereby creating more mystery that's offered. And I always think the mystery is more valuable than why or what it was that I withheld. And I kind of like to sort of get people to think, that was sort of like back with 25 Trumbull's Road, which was the collection of speculative fiction, which I've never written before. Well, that's not true. I always loved scary stories as a kid. I read Stephen King, and I was really, into all that through middle school and everything. But I really worked hard at like trying to keep as much away from the reader as possible, because I just like them try to fill in. I give them credit and have them that they're smart and that they're trying to fill in spaces themselves. So,
right, giving them something to engage with.
Exactly. Yeah.
Even in the new book of essays, Without Saints, that's coming out this fall with Black Lawrence, right? They're very short essays.
Yes.
And there's a couple of longer ones in there, but the short form really is where you like to live, it seems.
Correct. I do.
Is there anything else about the short form besides what you've already said that really makes it the home you want to stay in?
I guess always because the greatest emotional rushes I've had have always been pretty instantaneous. They've always been something that I've felt immediately, and I want to have the writing be that same way. I don't want it to be a slog. I want it to be something that immediately, I guess it's sort of like this kind of instant gratification thing, which maybe is sort of this entitled way to think, like, well, I want what I want when I want it. But I still, I kind of like that, and I kind of like bringing everything all at once to the forefront. To me, it's incredibly satisfying. And you're right, and by the way, that's the first I've seen of that. I haven't seen any of the arcs or anything. So, wow, there it is. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. So yeah, I mean, there's just that one piece in there that's like 5,000 words. The Night Fairy, which is sort of, I think, the centerpiece of the whole collection. But yeah, I don't know if I went so far off on what your question was, if I ended up somewhere else, but I think I answered that. I think.
Yeah, no, I really am interested in mystery as, like, to wind down my day, I usually watch something, whether it's a TV show, a movie, comedy, whatever it may be, just to kind of wind down. But I often find myself, binge watching mystery shows.
Mm.
And even though, like, if you watch enough mystery shows, like, it follows like a general progression of, like, here's how you figure out who it is before the TV show reveals who it is.
Hmm.
But I do like the mystery more, I think, if it fools me. I want to, like, be engaged enough that I'm following whatever's happening, but that I can fill in possible scenarios and why, and answer the why of whatever the mystery is. So I find that, your writing does allow me different things to, like, kind of insert myself or imagine what the speaker, right, narrator, whoever it may be, is discussing and why they're making choices that they make.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's an accurate insight, and for me, the idea of mystery is, as I said, was incredibly important. But also, I think that the greatest theme, I think, within writing in the Western world, whatever that means, is not getting what you want. It's like someone always doesn't get what they want, right? That's always what it is. And I'm not all for pat resolution. I don't want to give anyone what they want if that's what they're seeking. I want there still to be some search that's required. So I'm always writing, even though there can be a lot of despair, I try to make that despair beautiful as much as I can. I try to beautify it. And I try to honestly look at someone trying to get something that's unobtainable for whatever reason. It could be psychic, emotional, spiritual, whatever. But that's a constant thing that I think pervades throughout most writing, is that conflict of not getting something that someone desires. And I think the story that we're talking about, the 4 times 100 seasons, that's exactly what it's about. There's this relationship, somewhat dubious, somewhat clandestine, somewhat morally ambiguous, right? And they can't, for whatever reason, align their desires and their needs and their comforts. And there's always some sort of fractious sort of event or reality that keeps them separated from feeling connected and whole. It's always broken. And to me, that's really interesting, so I'm more comfortable in that world than I guess I am in something that's very clean and neat.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I was wondering, since you write so many different genres, how do you decide which one is best suited for an idea or a thought or a feeling?
I have no idea. I don't. I mean, I wish I could say something different to that. It just announces. This sounds so pretentious and bullshitty. but it's just the truth. It just like, I just know. I'm like, this is going to be a poem, and here it comes. I, I'm trying to think if there's ever been anything that I've started writing that I flipped it, right? So say I thought I was going to write a short story and it actually became an essay, or I was writing an essay and it became a poem. And I don't think so. I don't think I've ever done that. I mean, actually, have you ever done that? I'm just kind of curious. Has that ever happened to you? You're writing a poem and you're like, shit, this poem's not, there's not enough capacity or strength to hold what I need to say within this poem. So I have to let it breathe a little bit so it becomes an essay, or I don't know. Have you ever encountered that?
Personally, no. I have been told certain pieces should be something else.
Hmm.
And I've thought about, like, there's one piece in particular I'm thinking of that is a poem. It's actually Pachakcha. I don't know if that's how you say it actually, but it's like 20 sections,
Oh,
um,
okay.
with each section having like a title. Um, and multiple people actually told me that it should be an essay.
Hmm.
And I don't know that I know how to change the language of a poem to the language of an essay, at least what I think an essay is and should be. Um, so I haven't done that. um, I, I generally kind of am the same as you in certain ways where when I start writing something, it comes out as whatever form it generally is going to take. That doesn't mean I won't write paragraphs with poems in between paragraphs,
Hmm.
um, but they're generally set off as very clearly like a poem or something like that within prose.
Right. Because you just know, right? You
Yeah.
just know. And it's what's so strange is that sort of like a translation of intent that didn't require language, right? It's just you just knew it. It was a truism or a truth, like capital T, and you just fucking did it, right? You don't know why, but you just knew it had to be that way. I had something similar too, where I had this essay. I was really fond of this essay that I wrote. It was an older piece, and I had an editor at Kenyon Review. He said, "Look, Chris, this is fine, but you should think about fictionalizing this. You'll tell more truth." And I thought that was so interesting. I thought that was really like, huh, like somehow it would give me permission to say more, that maybe it'll allow me to write what it was that I thought I couldn't write or say, so that really kind of stuck in my craw a little bit. And I really kind of ground down on that for a while. And I was like, wow, that's kind of interesting. But kind of like you, even though it was like interesting, I still haven't like done it. I haven't been like, well, here I go. I just like, oh yeah, that's kind of cool. But it just sort of stayed with me, kind of haunts me. I don't know. There's something about it. But yeah, I'm like with you on that.
Yeah. And I also was thinking, the form dictates what's going to happen. Like either I'm thinking of, like in this particular poem, it's like kind of little vignettes.
Hmm.
They're all like each section's like 4 to 5 lines long. And they're little vignettes that kind of go together. And when I'm thinking more in fiction or essay, I'm thinking of exploring very particularly, I guess, a character or an idea for a character, whether it's me or someone else, um, or a thought in a different manner. And it comes to my head in a different manner. Uh, where like often with a poem, it'll be like, I'll think of a line and I'll be like, oh, that's really interesting. Let me see like what happens with this. And sometimes something does, sometimes something doesn't. But like when I'm thinking of a story, I'm like, oh, what if there was a character in this situation? And that's kind of like the impetus to begin something.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a really good point. I love what you said too about like the form dictates how you're going to say what it is you need to say. It's the form first that then dictates how that language begins to unwind, or present itself. It's sort of like the form is like the TSA, at the airport of creative writing, and that it's going to decide what goes through and in what manner and how, right? It's sort of, I hadn't thought of it that way before, which I think is really pretty cool. That like, once you know that you're working on a story, there are certain rules, I guess, in some ways, The rules seem so rigid that you're going to now follow in order to say what it is that you say. So I really like that. That's interesting.
Definitely. Well, thank you for that.
Yeah.
So let us look at the final version here of 4x100 Seasons, which is down here. And I'll ask you to read it whenever you're ready.
Great. 4x100 Seasons. I don't know if it's 4x100. I don't know yet. 4 times. Anyway, I'll think about it. 4x100 Seasons. 1. The apple trees hide behind ancient white pine, low hills. Gripping your sack and trowel, you hope the brainy pops of morel have returned. It's April, green as money. Winded, you bend your knees like seeking absolution. So many alien gills, the stalks gently lifted, gaping the humus. Your sack feels like a collection of dreams. Working your way back down, you think of her again, even though she's married, even though you're not. The mushrooms will need salted butter, cracked pepper. You will hand them to her warm at the counter as the sheets on her bed grow cold. 2. Splayed oceanside, the sun buffs your skin a furious hue. Wordless and wretched, you bite a stick of gum and your mouth rains like a car wash. It's the second straight weekend she's made other plans, and her absence fills you completely. A sudden kick of sand blasts your face and you gasp upright, brushing your eyes and mouth with both hands. The jogger, unaware, keeps jogging, escapes with your pride. Nearby women pity you. A deaf child laughs. The waves continue breaking like a chorus of baptism. You stand, spit your gum, and wonder when your world started falling apart. 3. Maple trees blush heavenward like painted fire. Everywhere sunlight sweet talks the edges of things, the purple wheels of aster. You embrace in the center of a covered bridge. Underneath, the river charts a course sluiced around boulder and bank, shiny pebbles, a high-pitched gurgle as if someone were drowning an angel. This is the last time we can do this, she says. You close your eyes and wish you were brave enough to argue. But the idea of her retreating back to her desolate home, its frigid rose bushes and perfectionist lawn, a death squad of white picket fences. 4. February still believes in sunsets. This is what you tell yourself to stay warm. Long wail of road left unplowed, feet making tracks like stitching the past to an unrecognizable present. It's nearly midnight. Maybe she's waiting at the tavern like she promised. Maybe she is inconsolable in her husband's arms. Grains of ice chandelier your beard, streetlights beatific in the blue fall of snow. Over the hill you look for the bar lights, the doors swept entry. Is that her climbing out of some blinded vision? Is that her voice filling the space between you and all this dark?
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
So we didn't look at the two middle versions of this you sent to me, but the sections do change order throughout the drafting process. And as we've said, right, seasons make their appearance and come in, and we begin in spring, we end in winter. But I noticed landscape is the focus of like the beginning of each section. So I was curious, how do seasons act on your composition and revision? And how were you thinking about that when you were moving things around here?
Well, I'll answer first the second part of your question, how I was thinking about it. And that, I wanted it to begin, I wanted to go in order that the seasons go in. And you're right, I had it kind of mixed up. I had it at one point where it was like spring, then winter, and then summer. And I was like, wait a minute. So I was just thinking chronologically. I was like, all right, I have to reorder this to get it in the right order that we actually experience as human beings on this earth, right? So I kind of moved them around that way. But in regards to how it impacts, the first part of the question was how it impacts how I revise, right? Like the seasons themselves.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, like, because that's the first thing I notice, I think, in this world. And again, it's a very tactile experience for me, and it's something that I immediately, I guess I romanticize a little bit, and that might seem a little bit strange, but I do romanticize the seasons and what they may or may not mean, but they're incredibly important to me, and it's a very tactile experience. And I think that's why I start there, because I want to ground the reader in a very similar way that I view something. I want them to also feel that and view it and experience that. And then once I have that grounding, once it's believable, I think is really what I mean, is that once the reader feels that they can trust me as a writer, that what I've written about is a season that they know and can experience as well, then they're willing to trust me the rest of the way. So in some ways, it's sort of setting up and making it sort of like a non-ironic, safe space that the reader can be like, okay, I trust you because this relates to what I see and experience. And then I can continue with the narrative, which is about these two individuals who have made all the wrong choices, right? And are gonna perpetually suffer. There is no happy ending, as you saw at the end. It's not like there's no one like, and then she was there and her hair was blowing, and then and we just did. Donald Hall said, there's no such things as happy endings, because if things are happy, they haven't ended. And I really believe that, right? So I'm not going to bullshit you or rip you off, right? I'm not gonna create a romance novel that sells you a bill of goods that is disingenuous in some ways. So yeah, I guess I'm kind of shitty in that I'm showing you how the world just kind of is. I'm not giving you this fantasy world, but at the same time, I'm also like trying to do it in a way that maybe surprises you, and allows you to feel it. So that's how seasons kind of informed me, I guess. I hadn't really thought that through. So I'm kind of excited where I ended up. I didn't know I was going to end up there, but
that's the most fun thing about interviews.
That's right.
You learn something new.
Yeah, that's right.
I think also the other thing I might add is like what the landscape does at the beginning, which includes whatever season or weather, is that it emotionally, I think, connects the reader to a certain mindset. Because, right now it's summer, and like I feel like a little more loose than I do in the winter when it's freezing out and there's snow on the ground. But even so, like I have a specific mindset where like in winter somehow I feel more like I'm trying to protect myself against something. Whereas in summer, I'm more like, anything goes, whatever.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. It's a really good point. And, I don't know if I'd like seasonal affective disorder or what, but summer in general is, I feel, most flung free into this world, that I can just kind of like do whatever. And it's usually my happiest time, for me. And fall a little bit too, fall very much because of how it smells and how it looks and everything. But you're right. I mean, I think winter provides that. Winter provides caution and some fear too, right? And I like the rigidity, the idea of like, the lack of like mobility, because it's so true, especially up here in the Adirondacks, where like snow isn't even really like weather. It's just something that happens, like wind. It's just always happening in the winter. You just sort of like forget to see it after a while, but then you're trapped. You don't know why you can't leave your house.
Yeah.
Snowed in. That's so brutal.
It is. It's true. So at the heart of this story is this relationship. There isn't really any dialogue in this particular piece, but there's plenty of interiority and exposition. And so we've talked a little bit about what you want to withhold. How do you decide what it is you withhold? And do you think form should always dictate revisions? Or do you sometimes use form as a launching point and then move away from it?
Yeah, well, I think for this particular piece, form does dictate revision, right? I mean, I would paint over the word count, and I was constantly like highlighting and then in my word program, and then clicking on what 99 words. Okay, so I have one more word to do. I think though in general, really like as an overarching umbrella kind of thing, that form should not dictate really too much as like a day-to-day rule. I think that what the piece of writing is, whether it's a poem or an essay or a flash speculative, whatever the hell, like it just needs to be what it needs to be, and then you just help it along as it moves in that direction. But here it was certainly it was no launching pad. I was pretty rigid, right? I was pretty rigid in how I wanted to keep instructing it. So yeah, so to answer your question, in general, yeah, when I know what I'm writing, like, oh, I know that this is going to be a short story, I just write it, and then I just let it be, right? And it might have dialogue. It might have a lot of dialogue. It might have none to very little. And as far as in regards to what I leave out, I guess again, because the third part of what I just read, the story, right? The third part, the fall part, I was really struggling because the ending that I had just seemed too convenient, and it just seemed like it was tying everything up very nicely. And it just kept nagging at me, and it kept nagging at me. And so I just started thinking about some Joan Didion that I'd read. She has a short book of essay. It's a long essay, but it's called Salvador, and it's about her time she was in El Salvador. And I've been to El Salvador. I've traveled through there, and I started thinking about death squads, like people are wont to do from time to time, think about death squads. And so I started thinking, which is a belief that I have, that the white picket fence vision, heaven, this is like arriving to the promised land by having a white picket fence, is in fact, to me, a metaphor for more like a death squad type of like sentence, right? So that felt more comfortable. I felt like, oh, thank God, because I couldn't get myself to an ending that felt authentic. It felt, again, I've used the word a lot, but it felt too convenient and too precious. So I was so relieved when I finally ended it on a point of thinking of like a suburban dream as more like a death sentence. So it's pretty terrible when I say it out loud, but oh well, I still kind of believe that. Yeah.
Well, I think one of the things that I really like about this new last section is this idea that perhaps the relationship is still going on. We can see they're still in communication, even after she has said, like, this is the last time before. And isn't that like what real life is like? Because even if a relationship ends, that doesn't mean it ends, because even if you never talk to the person again, you still think about that person because they were a part of your life in some meaningful way for a period of time. Much like if a death squad, right, they kill a bunch of people, like it's not that they're going to get away with it forever. Someone's going to find those bodies at some point.
That's right. And it's like, death itself can end a life, but it doesn't end a relationship. So even though someone might die, that death is the death of a person, but it's never the death of a relationship. Relationship supersedes death. And, whatever torment or like lot in life that this couple has been tossed into, it'll go on, I think. I don't know, but I think it'll go on well beyond their own lives, and it's like that relationship will remain a tangled, sordid, highly powerful, destructive thing, right? So yeah, I don't know.
So the title, 4 by 100 or 4 times 100. So because it was like I could I'm looking at it, it made me immediately think of the relay race, of where you have the 4 participants and they hand off the baton. And there's, of course, a jogger present here that kicks sand into the narrator's mouth. I was wondering, how do you think writing performs an exchange of functions both within itself and to a reader? And why does the relay of information matter?
Mm. I love that, by the way. I love your insight about the relay, right? I mean, the relay, the handing off of the baton from one to the other, and I love that connection down to the core of that piece. So, how does it inform? I'm sorry. How does it form and function again?
So, like, I'm thinking of writing as performing a function of exchanging information within itself
Hmm.
to a reader. Because, like, I think the writing process, like, whatever word you just wrote, somehow is going to inform the next word. Um, and then in revision, you go back and you look and you're like, you see something up here and something lower, and you're like, well, these really should go together because they're talking to each other, or this is why I have them separated.
Yeah, yeah. So it's really, you're right. So it's sort of like this ongoing dialogue, right? That you're trying to make sense of, and you're trying to referee in a lot of ways, So like, whereas I started off in the beginning thinking that I was just writing this very brief, tossed off 100-word thing, self-contained. It didn't have a world outside of these 100 worlds or 100 words. It really truly what I began to learn as I reread it is that there was a much more intricate and complicated, complex world within there, right? So it started to inform me that there was more that needed to be said about this relationship and this individual and the other individual that whoever this person was, right? So I think that handing off is like the movement, that happens. Both we have the seasons and we have like the relationship that is clearly, I think, clearly doomed to be traditional in any sense of the word. But I think that's what its job is that it's showing that sort of like descent into a lack of like cohesion, and kind of like my response right now is a lack of cohesion to what I'm trying to say. But yeah, I don't know, I'm trying to think of it and answer it at the same time, your question, which is a really good one. And I don't know. I mean, like that's really challenging. I mean, that's what I can come up with for now. It'll be something like tonight at 2:30 in the morning. I'll sit up like, I've got it. And I'll call you like, listen, I just want to go back and tell you, this is what I was thinking, but I don't know. That's kind of what it makes me think of first, but I want to think more on that. But yeah.
Yeah. One thing that I just thought of actually was, you have the essay about Donald Hall in this collection. And in some ways, that is like the handing off of information, your correspondence with Donald Hall, and the different things he told you over time about your own work. And I was thinking, in the interview series, I interviewed Mark Leidner, who's a poet, and he taught me for one semester when I was an undergrad, and he was a graduate student. And for whatever reason, like, I understood certain things from his teaching, um, in a way that, it's like that thing where, like, not every teacher you're going to click with,
Right.
but certain ones, like, whatever the manner of relay of information gets to you, it works. And so that's kind of what I was thinking of. Like, I don't talk to him very often, hardly ever, but like, I remember certain things even, 15, 20 years later, uh, that I was like, I something clicked, and I was like, I get that now.
Mm.
I don't like, I'm not claiming I understand it completely, but like, I get the idea.
That makes sense. Okay. And then, so that makes me think about two things, one in regards to this piece itself. I guess what I take from my own experience and sort of, translate into this story or whatever this is this idea of, failure being something that's more expected to happen than something that is, satisfyingly tied together and arrived at, right? There's this idea that I guess I'm coming from this place of like, count on, sometimes the worst things happening instead of the best, and getting what you want, which I kind of alluded to or spoke to a little bit before. And, and I think about some of my best teachers, right, that I've had in undergraduate and graduate and so forth. And they were always mostly the teachers who had nothing to do with that major which I was focused on. They were generally tended to be instructors, professors who had nothing to do with creative writing, or even weren't even part of the English department. You know, for example, probably my favorite instructor that I've ever had in my life, who I think about pretty regularly, and he's passed on now, but his name was David Gregory, and it was undergraduate school, and he got his PhD in mushrooms. I forgot what you call that, like the actual word. And I took a class of his called economic botany. And it was to satisfy this general ed, right? And they're always saying, well, for your general ed for this particular hard science, you want to take a 101 this, 101 that. And I was like, fuck that. I hate those lecture classes. So this satisfied it. It was like some like 400 level economic botany. And we would go out and he would teach us how to identify and forage and pick wild mushrooms that are edible. He'd point out the ones that weren't. And he was the audacity of him just even existing and doing this to me, I found so exciting, and it was so inspiring to me, because he clearly had this passion that he pursued in such a way that he didn't give a shit what anyone thought. He was so enthralled with goldenrod, right? And like he could talk about it forever. And I even love this one time where he had said, he's like, and he had this long white beard. Really, he was about 6'4", pretty thin. He was about 70 when I had him, really good shape. He was like, oh, Christopher, my God, looking under that pine tree, there's a spicy milky. I was like, what? And I went over, he goes, pick it. I was like, all right. And I picked it, and it's this mushroom, just look at it, it's any old like toadstool. And he's like, break it in half. And I was like, all right, all right. And then it started to like milk start coming. He was like, lick it. And I was like, okay. I trusted him, completely. And it was spicy, this super spicy, like a chili pepper milk. And he goes, that's great with pasta. And that was it. And then he moved on. And I was like, what the hell? I was like, and I was just so like, he was not bound by any one set of rules about how to be in this world. And I guess that permission, right, that you can still be successful and still be happy on this earth, but still pursuing it at an odd angle, like this is a bent world we live in. And if people find a way through it without sacrificing their integrity, to me is what I'm most inspired by. So getting back to your point, that handing off of that permission for me is what allowed me even to be a better writer, I think, if that makes any sense. So my writing improved by someone who pointed out a spicy milky.
Yeah. Well, and there's mushrooms in this story.
Yes, there are. And see, so it's even scarier than me. And I did once go like hunting for morels, and I did find them under this old like wild apple tree in the middle of the woods, and you're just like popping out. And I was like, this is wonderful. Yeah. So see, that kind of found its way into this piece.
Excellent. Well, Christopher, thank you for taking time to talk with me today. His new collection, Without Saints, is out in October with Black Lawrence Press. You can also check out 25 Trumbull's Road and Music for Ghosts. Thanks a lot.
Matthew, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. I really appreciate it.
Thanks.
You got it.